Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Walrus Talks Belonging. My name is Michael Milday, and I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Humanities at Western. Together with our friends at Western Alumni and the Arts and Humanities Student Council, we are the sponsors for tonight's event. We are delighted to have an absolutely incredible lineup of speakers for you, and it's wonderful to see such a full house. It is my pleasure to welcome you all and to extend a special thanks to those of you who traveled to London to join us. I would also like to acknowledge that the City of London is situated on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, Attawandaron peoples who have a long-standing relationship to the region of southwestern Ontario. In close proximity to London, there are three local First Nation communities: the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and Munsee Delaware Nation. In the region of southwestern Ontario, there are 9 First Nations and a growing Indigenous urban population. I would also like to acknowledge and welcome Grand Chief Joel Abram, member of the Chiefs Council of the Association of Iroquois and Allied Indians. He hails from the Oneida Nation of the Thames Settlement, member of the Wolf Clan. The topic that we have proposed for this evening is belonging. And I would suggest that our general experience of belonging is, frankly, complicated. We all identify with some family, some culture, or some group, and we think that these elements are essential in making us the person we are. We enjoy the familiar embrace of our friends, the features of our neighborhoods, the affirmation of our traditions. There's a lot of comfort in all of this. But there are also times when we react against these familiar bonds and find them suffocating or just plain irritating. And then we are driven to seek out different kinds of community, different kinds of belonging. And in this way, we set out to discover or create a new sense of ourselves. In the current day, these complex dynamics are further complicated by modes of transport that allow us to move over vast distances in a matter of hours, and by the easy availability of digital communications that promise us membership in countless groups with a handful of keystrokes or the swipe of a finger. There seems to be so much on offer, and yet it turns out that many of us end up feeling very much isolated and alone. So it seems like a good idea, a very good idea, to take an evening to think about all the different ways in which a sense of belonging affects us. At Western, in the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, we support the mission of the Walrus Talk series to engage with the topics that define our humanity in the 21st century. We want our students to become a community of scholars working collaboratively and competitively to address some of the most important questions of the day. And when they graduate, Western alumni will offer another sense of belonging by helping them to stay connected to their friends and colleagues so that they can continue their conversations and their inquiries. And now, it is my great honor to introduce Shelley Ambrose, a Western alumna from the Faculty of Arts and Humanities. Shelley sits on the advisory council of our School for Advanced Studies in the Arts and Humanities and is a very dear friend. She's also the publisher of the Walrus magazine and the executive director of the Walrus Foundation, and I invite her now to take over the proceedings. Shelley.
Thank you, Michael, and for that very warm welcome. I am indeed Shelley Ambrose of the Walrus and a very proud Western alum. My parents went to Western, my cousins go to Western, my cousins' children go to Western, my aunts and uncles went to Western. We are a purple family, and of course I'm wearing the purple. So it's very nice to be back in London even though we're not on campus. And we're very proud to be partnering with Western yet again this year. I'd also like to welcome Grand Chief Abraham and acknowledge that this territory has historically been a meeting place for many peoples. It remains so today, obviously tonight, and will continue to be a place of belonging in the future. The Walrus is all about the future. This little optimistic project started almost 15 years ago. In fact, our 15th anniversary is in 2018. And our goal is to create forums for conversations vital to Canadians. One way we do that is by publishing the Walrus magazine. Hands up if you know what the Walrus magazine is. Yay! Now, hands up and do not lie to me. Do you subscribe? We're going to do better than that. I'll talk to you about that at the end of the evening when you're still held captive right here. How many of you have been to a Walrus Talks before? This is our third in London. Welcome back. And how many of you first-timers? Let's welcome the first-timers. Yay. Tonight, incredibly, is our 83rd Walrus Talks across the nation. And so for those new to us, yes, we have a magazine called The Walrus. Yes, we have a series of Walrus Talks. And of course, we have a website called thewalrus.ca. But what we really are is a place. The Walrus is a place for you to come together to read, talk, listen, and share ideas for the future of Canada and your communities. In all things Walrus, you'll find well-told stories on politics, culture, environment, technology, and so much more. Everything we do is meant to spark another conversation. And so you are here, which means you have heeded the call, and we very much appreciate your presence, especially on such a beautiful evening. So the Walrus community, which includes you now, you share common traits with each other. One in particular is the tendency to actually think about stuff. The other is a tendency to believe, as we do, that the mind is like a parachute. It works nominally better when open. That is how we think about things at the Walrus. We are not left-wing or right-wing. As you know, a walrus has no wings. We are an independent entity with no owners and no one point of view. We have an educational mandate, which does not mean boring. We are governed by a board of directors. One of our board members, Gretchen Ross, hometown London girl, is here, down from Toronto for tonight. You can meet her later. We have an advisory council and an education review committee. I never used to think I had to say this out loud, but our journalism is fact-based. Yes, it is. Yes. We have live human beings called fact checkers that actually keep us in check. And we also train the future leaders in the media. We have a very unique editorial fellowship program at the Walrus designed to ensure that the future of fact-based journalism is bright. Our journalism and our training programs are supported by circulation, advertising, sponsorship, charitable donations, and partnerships. And there is no way we can do the work that we do without partners like Western University. We definitely must have some Western students and alumni here tonight. Go Mustangs, where are you? Alumni, students, woohoo! That is fantastic. As I said, I'm wearing my purple. We've been working with Western alumni and arts and humanities for several years. And this is the first time we've done this off campus, so thanks for coming out. Thank you also to our national partners at Shaw and at SSHRC, that is the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, and AMIA and Aeroplan. They're with us wherever we go, and we're very grateful. As Michael said, the topic tonight is belonging. And the usage of this word can mean an act of possession. I belong to a book club. It can be, this teddy bear belongs to me. But there's also a phrase called a sense of belonging, which has a more ephemeral quality to it. What does it mean to belong? What does it mean to feel you do not belong? Who decides who belongs? In a sense of belonging, is a sense of belonging the responsibility of the person with the sense, or the larger community or group providing or not providing that sense? Is it a state of mind? Is it measurable? Why does it matter? What happens when it's absent? At the Walrus, we like to stretch a topic or an idea and look at it from many different perspectives. That's what we intend to do tonight. So here's how the Walrus Talks works. Each of you has one of these programs in your hand. Each of you, the lights stay on, can follow along. The front is in speaker order. The back houses the bios of each of the speakers. I am not going to pop up like a jack-in-the-box and read the bios to you. We know you can follow along. And they will introduce themselves. So you will see and hear 8 talkers in a row. Each has 7 minutes. They know this. They are extremely well prepared and disciplined. You will hear them all in a row, and when you're done, when they're done, we're all done, you are all invited to the post-talks reception back there. There will be food, there will be drink. And just before I let them get underway, I would like to thank our talkers in advance. Thank you to, they're all volunteers, by the way. Thank you to the chair, Board of Governors, Western University, and a Western alum, Hani Hussain, the artist in residence and Western alum, London Arts Council, Eric Mendui, the president of the Samuel Family Foundation here from Montreal, Kim Samuel, best-selling author Kamel El-Suleili from Toronto, leadership coach, youth mentor, Mustang football alum and back doing his PhD, Jonathan Hood, award-winning writer also from Montreal, Heather O'Neill, YouTuber Molly Burke, who's here with her mom Neve and her guide dog Gallop, and the founder of the Amanda Todd Legacy Society, Carol Todd. Thank you all for coming. Let us begin.
I'm a son, a brother, a husband, a father. I'm a Canadian, a Muslim, an Arab. I'm an engineer, a Western alum, a volunteer, an environmentalist, a political activist, a senior, and more. So where do I belong? I am Hani Hassan, and I belong in all of those identities. A Lebanese-born author, Amin Maalouf, in his 1996 book, In the Name of Identity, Violence, and the Need to Belong, wrote, quote, each individual's identity is made up of a number of elements, and these clearly are not restricted to the particulars set down in official records. Of course, for the great majority, these factors include allegiance to a religious tradition, to a nationality, sometimes two, to a profession, an institution, or a particular social milieu. However, others frequently see us as flat and one-dimensional, selecting one element of our identity and neglecting the complexity and totality of who we are. Most of us are unique because of the combination of diverse characteristics, not because of a specific identity. I was born in London, attended elementary, high school, and university here. I am the eldest of my parents' 11 children. Our home was at the end of a one-block dead-end street that overlooks the coves. As a very young boy, I was awestruck by the wonder and natural beauty of the area and of the creatures that inhabited the coves. I would spend hours there, mostly on my own, just wandering and observing. I understood and related to those who wanted to protect our natural heritage. I belonged there. But London and Canada were much different in the 1940s than today. My family is Arab and Muslim. My parents emigrated from Syria and Lebanon. When I was born, there were only two families in London that identified as Muslims. Even though I was different in some ways, I believed that my neighbors, teachers, and classmates did not treat me differently. The environment was benign to those of us who did not belong to the dominant culture, probably because we did not pose a threat to the status quo. In fact, at times it seemed that acceptance of our difference validated the openness of those who were in authority. This is our Muslim. Interestingly, the mandated Christian education program in elementary school inadvertently led me into interfaith community service. Priests and ministers would deliver the weekly lessons when teachers were uncomfortable in doing so. Most of them were respectful of other faiths. However, some would deliver hurtful messages about non-Christians. When a preacher said something that was wrong or offensive about Muslims, I discussed that with my parents. My open-minded teachers would invite me to share my concerns and stories with classmates. By the time I reached the 7th grade, I had become a resource and was soon delivering talks about Islam at men's breakfasts in church basements. Islamic institutions were just being formed in London. I was very active in the embryonic London Muslim community and participated in interfaith and intercultural projects. I belonged in that environment. From my bedroom window, I could look north over the coast and see the steam locomotives crossing the trestle over the Thames. That provided my first introduction as a child to the word engineer. Because I was a pretty good student in math and science, I had no trouble getting into Western's fledgling engineering school. However, just before starting university, I met my wife, Najat. We married in 1961, in the midst of my engineering education. My summer job in 1963, working on the Trent Canal in Peterborough, gave me great confidence. After that, I knew that I belonged in engineering. When I graduated in 1964, our family had grown to include 2 sons. My first full-time engineering position was with the Department of Public Works in Halifax. While there, I continued my interfaith work and became educated about and involved in the human rights cause of blacks in Halifax's Africa. This was my first encounter with stark and blatant racism. I maybe didn't notice it before. I worked with strong advocates of equality, equity, and social justice. It allowed me to pivot to a more comprehensive perspective of those on the margins of society. I'd been aware, but did not appreciate, as a young person, the situation of Indigenous communities in London. I knew that I belonged with those seeking justice and equality. After completing a Master of Engineering program in Halifax, I took a position with an architectural engineering firm in Toledo, Ohio, my wife's hometown. There I remained active in social justice causes, including opposition to the Vietnam War and support for the Buckeye Basin neighborhood, where the poor and visible minority inhabitants had inadequate schools and services and no voice. In 1977, I was recruited by Dillon Consulting in London. At Dillon, I grew professionally, becoming a manager and partner. With the company's support, I participated in many voluntary activities, including the London Chamber of Commerce, the Cross-Cultural Learners Centre, the London Board of Education, London Muslim Mosque, and the Council of Muslim Communities of Canada. I also belonged in that voluntary sector. In the late 1980s, as chair of the Ontario Advisory Council on Multiculturalism and Citizenship, I worked extensively on equity and social justice policy, especially dealing with substantive matters of diversity, human rights, and equal treatment under the law. When I was appointed to the Judicial Appointments Advisory Committee, the Attorney General said that my mandate included educating the remaining members of the committee on the need for the Ontario bench to be reflective of the population of the province. More recently, I was invited by the Alumni Association to join Western's Board of Governors, eventually being named as its chair. For my volunteer efforts in 2011, I was appointed a member of the Order of Canada. Acceptance and recognition confirmed that I belonged in all those roles. I was fortunate to have had good role models. My mother was the consummate advocate. She could not witness an injustice without responding. My father was a quiet and generous man who encouraged me and my siblings to be the best that we could be and to be helpful for others. My father taught me the importance of collaboration. Amin Maalouf also wrote, quoting, "It can happen that some incident, a fortunate or unfortunate accident, even a chance encounter, influences our sense of identity more strongly than any ancient affiliation. I call that serendipity. Serendipity only works if you're open to the opportunities and have a sense of belonging and confidence in each of your identities, and the possibilities are unlimited." Thank you.
Tanse Guakida, Bojo, Ani, Segoli, Sego, Kiher Kulamalsi. In my language, we say Tanse. My name is Eric Mandawi. I'm from the Beaver Lake Cree Nation in northeastern Alberta. I've called London my home for the past 5 years or so. I'm currently the artist in residence at the London Arts Council. I'm also a medical student at the Schulich Medical School, Medicine and Dentistry. And I'm here to talk to you guys today about belonging. I have a lot of affiliations of other places that I find belonging in. But for me, my definition of belonging is always related back to how it relates to my personal wellness. I see belonging as medicine, and as a medical student, we see a lot of medicine. But for me, belonging has always been integral and part of who it is that I am and how I identify with the world around me. Finding belonging in the places that you find yourself in. As a Nahiawak, which in my language is a Cree man, I didn't grow up as part of my community. I was born in Toronto, and from there we went down to the States. I lived in Glendale, California, just north of Hollywood, as well as San Antonio, Texas. Eventually came back to Toronto for school. And in all of those places, finding that sense of belonging was never, it was never black and white. It was never cut and dry. It was never, I know that I belong here because of these X reasons. So finding that belonging, it was always something that was a challenge for me. I struggled a lot with this idea of belonging to a place. I remember going through high school and even earlier years in university. One of my least favorite things to be asked was, hey, where are you from? These days, it's probably my favorite question, because then I can talk about this kind of stuff. But as a young person, it caused a lot of detriment, and it caused a lot of trauma. And I didn't necessarily know where that trauma was coming from. But when I think about my personal history and my family's history, my grandmother, she's a residential school survivor. And when she was in residential school, everything that you can imagine would have happened to her, all of the findings that are coming around, you know, the mistreatment and the abuse and the trauma, the things that, you know, Canada's untold history, all of those things happened to my grandma. And all of that trauma around belonging to a place, that is something that those institutions took from her from a young age. And I think of when I would travel as a young person, you know, with me as a young person and traveling with my family, and seeking that belonging. We know where we're from. We know where our ancestry comes from, but we don't necessarily know where it is that we are quote unquote meant to be. So for me, belonging has always been it's been a journey. It's something that I'm constantly seeking out, and it's something that I'm constantly working on and finding that way of knowing where it is that I'm coming from, knowing who it is that I am, and knowing where it is that I'm going. But as I mentioned, I find belonging for me is it's medicine. You know, we find that belonging in the things that we do. Sometimes it's part of our identity as part of our profession. Sometimes it's part of our identity as, you know, the groups that we find ourselves affiliated with. You know, for me, I find a lot of identity in the work that I do as an artist. I'm a storyteller, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a musician. And when I think of these tools, these mediums that I use in seeking out that sense of belonging, I always have to, you know, remind myself, where do these mediums, where do these tools come from? And I shared with you, you know, this evening, one of the tools, one of the medicines that I use to find that belonging. And I find a lot of belonging in this drum. And if you look at this drum, you know, it's completely organic, it's non-GMO. You won't find it you won't find it in the health food section, but maybe one day. But this drum, it's you know, on the hide of it, that's a deer hide. The rim of it, that's cedar. All of the tools, all of the materials used to make this drum come from this place, come from this land. It belongs here. When I use this medicine as part of my practice, as part of my art, I'm seeking out that belonging. And when we think about this drum, some of you may know the teachings about, you know, drums and how we use them in our communities. And the drum represents the heartbeat of Mother Earth, right? So when I'm using this drum, and I remember sitting in my seat just earlier, feeling my own heartbeat, because I'm nervous. up against this drum, I know that part of that medicine, part of that communication is connecting to this place that we find these medicines that we use to keep ourselves well. So again, for me, belonging is that sense of knowing where it is that our medicines come from. And I find belonging as medicine. The journey that we find ourselves in, whether that's, whether we live here now or whether we are moving somewhere, belonging is everywhere it is that we go. And I do a lot of traveling personally. And I find belonging in everywhere that I go, whether that's here on Turtle Island, or whether that's overseas in Eastern Europe, or whether that's in Asia. All of those places, I seek out those things that come from the land, something that belongs there, because part of my medicine is travel. Part of my medicine is seeking those things out. Because as part of that journey, we are constantly seeking out where it is that we are from, where it is that we are currently, and where it is that we are going. Thank you.
You are not alone. You belong. It gets better. 3 simple sentences that have the power to profoundly and positively impact diverse peoples experiencing a huge range of challenges. This was the finding of a Stanford University social psychology study that resulted in the so-called belonging intervention. A simple premise and an even simpler method, storytelling, connecting different groups through sharing stories, generating incredible results. Good evening. My name is Kim Samuel. The sustenance we draw, knowing we are not alone, is what I want to talk about tonight. My mission is building the bonds of belonging. Not because it is something pleasant or nice to do, but because I believe that belonging is a human right. Not a need, but a right. I believe that repairing and renewing human connectedness is one of the greatest challenges of our time. It may sound paradoxical in our digital age, where we're seemingly connected round the clock. Yet, more and more, we hear reports of people feeling alone and cut off, a feeling I metaphorically describe as sitting alone at the bottom of a well. We see it in cities where people spend more time in their cars or on their screens and less time getting to know their neighbors. We see loneliness skyrocketing among older people and surging among younger ones too. Just last month, The Atlantic profiled a shocking rise in teenage depression and anxiety linked directly to smartphones and the retreat of teens from real social interactions. We see it here in Canada, the refugees we have been proud to welcome, and also share the struggles of searching for identity, for hope, or of missing everything they were forced to flee, including happiness. You see, as human beings, we are social creatures. We rely on others to help us thrive and grow. And when we are deprived of meaningful relationships, it literally makes us sick. Our cells inflame, our hormones misfire, our immune systems weaken. Studies have concluded that isolation is as bad for your health as smoking, 15 cigarettes a day. This is a silent epidemic and a barrier to economic growth. Because when society sends a person or a group of people the message that they do not belong, it makes them feel less valued, less significant, less human. And nobody should ever be made to feel less than. Yet, to paraphrase Leonard Cohen, there is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. When social bonds are strong, connectedness and feelings of belonging catalyze progress. By building belonging at the heart of every endeavor, we can all contribute to the way forward. And by the way, we only belong if we belong together. Now, way back in the last century, when I was in school, the 3 R's that were really important were reading, writing, and arithmetic. Please ignore for a moment that only one of those actually begins with the letter R. But now I see an additional 3 R's: respect, recognition, and reciprocity. Together, they build what I envision as the 3 pillars of a social connectedness framework. And moreover, they begin to help us to give life to and to live the human right to belong. The first pillar, respect, means that new ideas and programs must begin with active listening, where every voice in the community has value. The point of listening isn't simply to sympathize with those in pain or those who are suffering. The point is that strategies embedded in listening, awareness, and solidarity are the best way to build cohesion and connection and to bring communities together. Too often, those with the best of intentions try to impose their own solutions from outside. It reminds me of a story about 7 young scouts who proudly reported how they had helped a 90-year-old woman across the road. "That's great," said their troop leader, "but why did it take 7 scouts?" And one scout bravely stepped forward and said, "Well, she didn't want to go." Instead of trying to lead from the front, we must get behind communities themselves, because overcoming isolation is always done with and not for. Operating from a foundation of mutual respect helps reinforce the second pillar, recognition. Helping a community uplift itself begins with honoring its worth. Typically, programs focus on a community's problems or gaps, which can reinforce a sense of dependence, deficiency, or despair. But recognition leads us to search for its strengths and to build on them together. Connectedness is always a two-way street. In reaching out to others, we are touched as well. Pillar number 3 is embracing the critical value of reciprocity. Embracing reciprocity leads to solutions and interventions that generate multiple benefits because they strive not simply to address one sector or one group, but rather to reinforce linkages. When we take this approach, exciting possibilities emerge for community-driven, sustainable solutions that draw critical connections for every member of community. Through engagement between groups, we foster empathy that in turn will lead to new ideas and strengthen support. Here in Canada, as we reflect on 150 years, there is an opportunity and an imperative to reach much further and to finally and fully listen, especially here and especially now. I believe ancient wisdom will light a pathway to a more connected future. Through respect, recognition, and reciprocity, we can embrace the reality that we are the same human family. We can look to traditional wisdom, Sawak, as expressed by New Chandleth peoples, which means we are all one. We are connected. These sentiments sum up a new paradigm that we all need to reflect upon in our own lives and in plans and policies for the future. One way forward enlightened by this deep listening, can ensure that we remember there is no them. There is always and only ever us. Rosanna Deerchild, a remarkable Cree poet, has shared, "The round dance is not over until the circle is complete, until all the people are dancing as one." It is in this spirit we can all champion and ultimately realize the human right to belong. As Margaret Atwood wrote, "We need each other's breathing, warmth. Surviving is the only war we can afford." I cannot say it any better than that. Thank you very much for your time and for your listening.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kamala Solaili. I'm going to talk to you today about belonging as an Arab Muslim Canadian who also happens to be gay. These are two identities that are often seen as incompatible at best and sometimes antagonistic to each other. But I want to start with two scenes. I'm going to bookend my talk with two scenes. The first one, the opening scene, was right here in London, Ontario, 20 years ago. There was an event hosted by the Canadian Arab Federation. I think it was something about the next generation of Arab Canadians. So 20 years ago, I was the next generation of Arab Canadians. And it has one of those sort of lovely titles like Lifting the Veil or Breaking Stereotypes. You know, one of those cliches that my community just loves to prove that we're people too. So I think I was clearly the token gay on that panel. I was frightened because I had never been so publicly out in my community until that evening. The panel itself went really well. You know, most people on the panel either tolerated or ignored me altogether, so you know, nothing really happened. But when I went back to my hotel room, I was followed by a group of young Muslim and Arab men who wanted to lecture me on my errant ways. It turned to a very violent confrontation with homophobic slurs and religious sermons. I locked myself in, called security, and yet they kept knocking at my door. The thing I did immediately was to book my return ticket first thing the next morning, even though I was supposed to spend the day in London, Ontario. I mean, they probably weren't from London, Ontario anyway. They're probably some hooligans from Toronto anyway. So if I had any lingering doubt about separation between my gay identity and my ethnic one, that encounter certainly put it to rest. My place in the world, my sense of belonging from that moment on would be with the LGBT community. For someone of my age, I'm 53 now, that was the only option we had. We belonged in one camp or another. Like many gay men who came from the so-called visible minority or ethnic background, I've often felt I had to make a choice. It's either my native language, my culture, and my religion, or my sexuality. Then 9/11 happens. The community that I turned my back on is under suspicion, under threat. I'm under suspicion, I'm under threat. The community that I embraced is largely white and is not above engaging in same acts of racism. Being gay, after 9/11 I discovered, does not absolve you from other forms of prejudice. Once again, I have to face the challenge of choosing side, or at least keeping one foot in each camp, never feeling entirely safe or welcome in one or the other. I was a theater critic at the Globe and Mail. I've seen hundreds of plays from multicultural theater companies exactly about that theme. I used to make fun of them, and then I suddenly realized why they always go on about not belonging in one world or another. But funny how what a decade or two can change. For younger generation from members of the LGBT community, this separation is no longer tenable. Many of them want the people they love, they sleep with, and the families they come from at the same table. Nobody wants to live a compartmentalized life the way I did and my generation did. But the question I ask you tonight, can communities that historically either reviled or ignored one another learn to work together outside of pockets of progressive groups? Now, it is easy for me to go to a progressive Muslim community and feel at ease. It's easy for me to go to a progressive queer community and feel at ease. But the challenge is, can I go to a suburban mosque with my partner? And is it safe for me as a Muslim or Arab gay man to go on dating apps without getting either fetishized or turned down from the no femme, no people of color white men? At the very least, there's a conversation on the way. A year ago, I supervised a master's project about the Unity Mosque, a progressive queer mosque in downtown Toronto and in other parts of the country. It was done by one of my former students, now my former student, and he was a convert to Islam who wasn't himself gay, but he was curious and wanted to and he did a terrific story. By the way, he applied for the Walrus Fellowship, so make sure I'll tell you his name later. So I wrote him a reference letter. So I'm feeling very positive and optimistic that someone like him can actually write a story about the queer Muslim community. That was in June. He's done in June. It was done in early June. And then on June 12, you may remember, on the morning of Sunday, June 12th, I woke up to the news that there was a shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Florida. I knew, my heart just told me, the killer is going to be Muslim and brown. But what I didn't expect is that the club itself had a Latin themed night, and most of the victims were black and brown, gay, lesbian, and trans people. It was a dark day, certainly for the victims and their survivors, and for the LGBT community in general, because here we are in 2016, we can still be killed for our basic desire to love, to dance, to celebrate a Saturday night with our friends. But for everyone who, like me, who identifies as gay and also happens to be Muslim, the backlash on social media was fierce, and once again, I felt compelled to take sides. This time I took the Muslim community side because I felt they needed the support more. But I also wonder, is there an opportunity in tragedy? Both religious and sexual minorities can understand that in times of stress, both of them can be thrown under the campaign bus. Look at what's happening south of the border. A Pew Research Center survey in the US conducted this year found that 52% of US Muslims now say homosexuality should be accepted by society. By contrast, only 34% of white evangelical Protestants believe the same. Which brings me to my closing scene. Last week, a former executive of the Canadian Arab Foundation, the same foundation that held the event here, that held the event here in London, Ontario 20 years ago, invited me to another event in Toronto. I said, ugh, here we go again. But it was a fundraiser. And the real reason he invited me is that he was trying to set me up with one of his closest friends. His matchmaking skills suck, but there is hope, my friend, there is hope. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Heather O'Neill. That should automatically come with a trigger warning, so that's my trigger warning. I have this too. Edgar Allan Poe wrote that the death of a beautiful woman is unquestionably the most poetical topic in the world. Dead women have always been popular in art. Take Sir John Everett Millet's esteemed painting of Ophelia. Spurned by Hamlet, she is depicted as a corpse floating on the top of the water, her delicate body adorned with wild flowers. Images of Ophelia are everywhere in fashion spreads and women's magazines. Their white stockings and dresses are bloated like stingrays. Their hair curls around their head in tangled fairy-like knots. Their dead eyes are closed sweetly, as though they are eternally prepared for a kiss. The fake dead spread is hugely popular in fashion editorials. While I was working on my novel, The Lonely Hearts Hotel, I began to be acutely aware of the image of dead girls in art and fashion spreads everywhere I looked. Female passivity has always been highly prized in art and fashion as an ideal of beauty, but the models in some fashion magazine weren't only despairing, depressed girls like Shakespeare's perturbed lass. These girls in the images were in images that suggested gang rape, murder, and extreme physical abuse. Here are some examples from the past 10 years. Jimmy Choo's ad featuring a murdered woman lying in the trunk of a car. Dolce & Gabbana, gang rape. Water and Oil for W Magazine with dead women being washed on the shore. Pretty Wasted for Interview Magazine featuring passed out girls waiting to be assaulted. Vogue Italia, which ran an entire spread based on domestic abuse. And Marc Jacobs with Miley Cyrus lying next to a dead body. These portrayals are so common in fashion shoots that the contestants in an episode of America Top Model were all required to do a fashion shoot where they portrayed murdered women. And if you think that any type of woman can achieve a certain status that allows them to be spared from this type of portrayal, Vice magazine ran a fashion editorial featuring famous women writers who had committed suicide. Sun Mo, who's a poet from Taiwan, and she hanged herself with a stocking. Vice magazine actually gave information where you could buy the stocking and the price. While I was writing The Lonely Hearts Hotel, I decided to confront this idea of the brutally murdered woman as art. I presented a series of images of murdered girls as still life paintings, as though they were flowers that were plucked at the height of their bloom and arranged by men in a manner in which their beauty could be fully appreciated. There were girls with bullet holes in their heads. They were standing at the bottom of a river, their hair blowing magically and effortlessly around them as they opened their mouths in perfect O's of surprise. Which leads me to my repeated interest in writing from the perspective of an alienated female body. I was drawn to this because I had existed in one for so long, but did not know what to make of it. When I hit puberty as a girl, the world began to scrutinize me in a perverse way. The neighbors looked out their windows and gave me dirty looks because I was walking the dog in jean shorts, or just sitting blowing bubblegum on a bench, or twirling a baton while talking to the garbage man. Suddenly the world became obscene and I hadn't done anything. Everyone was just projecting these thoughts on me. I was surrounded by perverts as any girl was. Once I was sitting on a public bus at rush hour and the man next to me took my hand and put it on his penis. I was buying milk at the corner store and a man in a trench coat opened up his trench coat to reveal he had nothing on underneath. I looked up at the convex mirror at the end of the aisle. There was nothing that the mirror could do. In any case, the owner could rest assured he wasn't stealing anything. I was attacked twice in public, once on a bus at rush hour. I was walking my toy poodle once, and a gold Coupe de Ville drove up next to me, and the man inside inquired whether I would like to star in pornographic films. I answered the telephone, and the man at the other end asked if I would like to sit on his face. Like telemarketers, they always called at dinner time. I was a blank screen with the pornographic male gaze being projected onto it. Because I also lived in an abusive, dysfunctional home, I ran away in order to have whatever possession I could over my body, knowing I was stepping into the dangerous world of the street. I had no interest in boys, not really. I wasn't mad about them the way I was about other girls. I looked for fascinating girls on the street, the ones who had the strangest thoughts. There was a girl with bangs to her nose who was always reading Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra. There was a girl who made miniature furniture out of bits of clay and kept them in a tin lunch pail. There was a skinny girl who had a voice like Grace Slick. There was a girl who had a scrapbook filled with images she cut out of magazines. One girl played a toy accordion she wore on her back like a school bag. There was a girl whose fingertips were always covered in black ink from drawing in her notebook. She drew tattoos all over my arm with a ballpoint pen. I was like Sleeping Beauty, protected by a huge rose bush. I met a girl wearing a rainbow-striped dress that went down to the ground. She had a pink beret over her thick black hair. I adored her look. Girls dress for each other, not for boys. She was so mad, it was lovely. She spoke about the moon and sadness so eloquently, I would be almost jealous. Once she stole me a can of cranberries from the supermarket. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do with it. Once she was committed in the psychiatric wing of a hospital and I could never see her. I would write her letters and leave them at the desk. There's a sort of insanity to being a teenage girl. I fell madly in love with everything. Everything made me excited. Drinking coffee out of a cracked cup with a yellow rose on it, the covers of paperbacks in bookstore windows, the gold songbirds on the wallpaper in a motel room, the stack of television monitors in the store window, each playing a different show, a trumpet player in the subway. You see the world in such a strange and intense creative way in that brief time when you truly belong, when you truly believe you don't belong to anyone. You aren't really a daughter, you aren't anyone's partner, you aren't related to anyone at all. People have accused me of writing weak characters or disempowered females. That's because everything about young women is an attribute for being weak, shallow, and vulnerable. If an intelligent and serious person is judged by their similarities to a middle-aged white male, then yes, I fail, and my characters fail at that. But girls contain multitudes. We are made up of so many parts. The reason that the monster in Frankenstein is so memorable is that he is fashioned out of cheap castaway body parts in a spectacular feat of biomechanical engineering. When it opens its mouth, out comes Mary Shelley's voice, that of an alienated teenage girl brought back from the dead. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Hood. I am a former CFL player, so I like to move. So I need to get you guys to move with me. Can everybody please stand up? Oh no, I've been standing all day. I came here to sit and relax. What are you doing? Now, as you're standing, I need you to get a partner. Get a partner that's one person. One person, one of you is A and one of you is B. We're talking about belonging here, right? I need you to have a partner. Feel like you belong. Now, partner A, let me get a hand. Turn to your partner, give him a high five. See, that's what we do in sport to show that you belong, all right? Now, partner B. Partner B, turn to partner A and say, you look great tonight. Partner A, look them dead in the eye and say, well, thank you. Partner A, turn to partner B and say, there's greatness inside of you. Partner B, in response, I want you to turn to your partner and say, I own you. Partner B, two hands in the sky, give your partner a high five, and grab a seat. You guys feel the energy shift in the room, right? You gave high fives. Why? We have this energy inside of us that when we get it aroused and we combine it with someone else, we make them feel like they belong. We bring them up, levels upon levels. I said, say that I own you. And a couple of people are like, oh, I don't know where this person comes from. But the reason I said that is because there's a difference in the way you treat something that you own and the way you treat something that you borrow, right? Right? I have siblings, right? I have brothers, I have sisters. And when they borrow my clothes, I don't think that they take as much care of them as I do. And sometimes I'm very, very reluctant to let them borrow my things because they don't own them. And when you own something, it's like it's part of you. It's like it belongs, right? And do we have any farmers in the building? Just raise a hand if you're a farmer. If you plant anything in your backyard, peppers, yeah, okay. You don't have to own a huge farm, right? But you have a green thumb, okay? So every seed, it needs three things to grow. It needs water, it needs sunlight, and it needs soil, right? The soil. If I take a mango seed, I love mangoes. My parents are from the Caribbean. I go almost every year, and I love mangoes. They're sweet, they're juicy, they're amazing. But if I take a mango seed and I plant it here in the soil in London, will it grow into a tree and produce mangoes? No. Why? Because it doesn't belong, right? It doesn't belong in this soil. It doesn't belong in this climate. The seed is still good, but it does not belong. I was an individual. When I was in high school, I was a young man who didn't belong. I was in a school that didn't have many outlets for my energy. I was an energetic guy, maybe even more than I am right now. I had so much energy, but there were no outlets. I was a good seed in the wrong soil, so I did not belong. And it ended up getting me into a lot of trouble, right? So my mom says, "You're not staying here. We're moving you to another school." School after school, couldn't get in. Didn't know why. Actually, I do. It was because it still wasn't the right environment. Finally, we found the school. It was over capacity, but she kind of protested. She sat there until I was in class. So I get into class now, and the atmosphere is different. The soil is much different than the last place I was at. There were many, many different ways in which I could use that energy for good. There were football teams, basketball, student council, clubs, organizations. And the most amazing thing about this place was that they had teachers who cared about me and made me feel like I belonged. So now I started to grow. Now I started to flourish. I'm doing well in school. I'm doing well in sports. I ended up being one of the better players in the country. Went out to university at St. FX, got drafted into the CFL, played for 6 years. All in the while, I came back, did a master's degree here at the University of Western Ontario, and I'm currently doing my PhD with a very accomplished individual as my supervisor, Dr. Jim Weiss. Can you give him a quick round? And none of this would have happened unless I was in that environment, unless I was in that rich soil that made me feel like I belong. It took a little bit of suffering, but my suffering was met with people who loved and supported me and made me feel like I belong. So suffering is part of kind of belonging, leading to belonging. And I believe that giving also leads to belonging. Now, I'll share a personal story with you. One Thanksgiving, it was my turn to make dinner. I was living downtown Toronto. I went to St. Lawrence Market, bought the groceries, was ready to cook. As I'm buying the groceries, I saw a man at the entrance, and he wanted some money. So he had his cup, and I had some change. I put it in, but he looked at me, and it was this look. It was kind of different. You when you get that look from someone, I felt this aura, this energy. And I bought my groceries, and I came back, and I went to the car, and I was like, this is weird. This is really getting to me deep in my core. So I went to the machine, and I said, look, it's Thanksgiving. I'm thankful for what I have, and I could spare a couple dollars more. So I went out, I got like $40 out. I drove up. I rolled the window down. I waved over it. He looked at me, and I said, come on over, right? He looked at me. And I took the money, and I held it out. And he held his hand out, and he grabbed my wrist. He looked me in my eye, and his eyes started to water because of the gratitude that he had for me giving him $40. That's all it took. That's all it took for this man to feel like he belonged. And I'm here in my car, I'm trying to look away, trying to shake it off. I couldn't get his gaze off of mine. I couldn't. I just sat there starting to tear up. But that's when I realized the power of belonging. The power of belonging. For that 1 second, he felt like I felt like I belonged. We belong. So my challenge to you today, my challenge to you for the rest of your life, is to use your head and your heart. Use your head and a bit of endurance. Sometimes there's some challenges we're going to have to go through, but if we go through them with each other, we'll foster a sense of belonging. Sometimes we're going to have to give, but if we do it with a willing heart, we can foster belonging. And if we can build leaders that engage community, we can create societies that foster belonging. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Molly Burke, and I am a square peg in a round hole. Fitting in, belonging, has never really been my thing, but that certainly hasn't been by choice. And I'm sure you're wondering what somebody who's never belonged can contribute to a conversation about belonging, but hopefully a lot. I live in a world that's not made for me. The world is made for the average, the majority, and that's not who I am. Looking at me, you might think I am your basic pumpkin spice loving 20-something with a broken ankle, but there is a lot more to me than meets the eye. In fact, I is the very problem. I should mention something, because due to media-perpetuated stereotypes and misconceptions, you probably haven't been able to tell just by looking at me. But I am blind. And that's exactly why there's a sleeping lump of fur on the stage with me. His name is Gallop, like a horse running, and he is my very hardworking guide dog. When I was 6 months old, I started going to Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto. And when I was 4 years old, I was finally diagnosed with a rare genetic eye disease called retinitis pigmentosa, or RP for short. RP is a degenerative retinal disease that causes the progressive loss of vision. I was born legally blind, but I wouldn't lose the majority of my vision until I was 14. And although I grew up with a lot of sight, and most of my vision loss didn't happen until grade 8, it wasn't long after my diagnosis that I started to realize I was different, and that I was going to have to grow up in a world that wasn't meant for me. I was only in grade 1 when I went home from school and asked my parents, "What's wrong with me?" I wanted to know why I had a special teacher that sat next to me in class, and why I read off the whiteboard she wrote on instead of the chalkboard at the front of the class like everybody else. I wanted to know why I was allowed to write with black markers when every other student was told they weren't allowed to use markers and had to use pencils. They all wrote on white paper, and I wrote on cream-colored paper with thick black lines. And most importantly, I wanted to know why all the other kids in the class got to go to the African lion safari on a field trip, while I went to a picnic with the deaf and blind students in the school board and all of their special teachers. It was then that I first heard the words retinitis pigmentosa, although it would take me a lot longer before I learned how to pronounce it, and even longer to learn how to spell it. It was around that same time that I started learning how to read and write in Braille, while the other students took French as their second language credit. I started taking O&M, or orientation and mobility, where I learned how to physically navigate a world that I don't belong in. And although learning to hit people in the ankles with a white cane till they got out of my way was a very useful skill, it's not very good for fitting in, and certainly not great for making friends. And as I was learning these adaptive skills, they were trying everything they could think of to improve my vision. Yellow tinted glasses to help with light sensitivity and color contrast, glasses for distance, thick Coke bottle glasses to help magnify. Test after test, surgery after surgery, they tried everything they could to help me, and nothing worked. They tried everything they could because society is told to view disability as something we need to fix. The medical model of disability tells us that the disabled person is the problem, and we need to do anything we can to fix them, to change them, to cure them, to heal them, to make them normal, to make them fully functioning and fully able, whatever that means. I think that mindset is the problem. I live with a rare disease for which there is no known cure. On top of that, a very rare gene has caused my rare genetic blindness. I'm that lucky. For me, there's no cure. There's no medical model of disability. There's no hope of fitting in or belonging to a world that buys into or supports that framework. I am not broken, and I don't need to be fixed. Society does. I live in a world that wasn't built for me, but what if it was? If everything was made accessible, if every restaurant offered Braille menus, and every phone you could buy came equipped with the ability to turn on talking software, I would never have to have somebody read the menu to me, and I would always be able to borrow my friend's phone when mine died. There's the social model of disability. The idea that the disabled person is not the problem. Everything around them is. Making the world more accessible is not only easier than you might think, it's more beneficial. A lot of accessibility features are great for people with disabilities, but are also helpful for everybody else. It's called the curb cut phenomenon. Slanted sidewalk crossings are great for people in wheelchairs or who use walkers, and for mothers pushing their babies in strollers, for kids on skateboards, or couples riding bikes. Automatic door openers are perfect for people in wheelchairs, and for when your arms are filled with groceries. In modern parlance, it's known as universal design. Designing and building everything to be accessed, enjoyed, understood to its fullest extent by everyone, regardless of their size, their age, their ability, or their perceived disability. One company that shows this perfectly is Apple. Every product they release, I could buy at a store, open up, and use on my own independently, no extra cost and no assistance needed. And I ask you to imagine how liberating, how empowering it is to be shown by a company that they view you as belonging to their customer base, when so many others tell you the exact opposite. Try closing your eyes and using your microwave, doing your laundry, or doing something as simple as paying for a cup of coffee. Nowadays, everything is touchscreen, and 99% of it is not accessible to me. You'll very soon learn it's not made for you, because they don't think you belong. I've never fit in, I've never belonged, and I'm okay with that. I've learned to adapt to my situation, and I've learned to adjust to my life. But imagining a world where I did belong, where everyone with a disability did, is pretty amazing to think about. And to me, that world isn't one where I can see. It's one where I don't have to. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Carol Todd. My daughter was Amanda Todd. When I was first asked to when I got my email from the Walrus Talks asking if I would consider accepting to come up here and do a 7-minute talk on belonging, I hesitated. I hesitated because the word belonging actually scares me. It scares me personally because of what I've gone through in my life with my daughter. It scares me because of what I've gone through in my life as a person. And so I accepted, and I put up sticky notes, and one of the organizers knows this. I put up sticky notes on my pantry in all different colors, and I've done this for 6 months on different words about belonging. And it sort of empowered me not, and the Walrus Talks, and Shelley and David will understand this, not a day went past in the last 6 months where I did not think about what belonging was. And so I did look it up in the dictionary, and I found out the definitions for belonging included possession, closer intimate relationships, security, the issue of vulnerability, and being relevant to anyone who seeks understanding, change, love, and acceptance. And so why is belonging so important to all of us? And what have I learned about true belonging? And what defines the word vulnerable? I have learned that many of us can often be afraid of being alone, and being alone can sometimes be lonely, especially in our times of darkness and fear. And as a parent, I have seen my own child wanting to fit in and belong. And for those of you who might not know my story, my daughter was 15 when she died by suicide on October the 10th of 2012. And that date just passed recently. 5 years of not having my child with me. She wanted to fit in and she wanted to belong so badly with her peers, with her family, with her loved ones, with her pets. And I can stand here and I can say, I have learned from my daughter in her life and after her death. And we all live with stories, and we learn from the stories. The stories in our lives are so important. I just read an article in the summer that said that if you present a real-life story and you share it, 64% of it will be remembered by your audience. If you don't present a real story and you present facts only, 19% gets stored in your brain to take away. I want you to go home with 64% or more. And so my blend of speaking is speak from the heart, but also speak from the words. As an individual human being, I wanted to belong to someone's family. And from my experience, I will synopsisize what happened to me. I was born, I was put in an orphanage. I was adopted, and I was adopted by, I'll say, George and Nancy. Nancy died when I was 4, and George remarried. And the woman he decided to remarry didn't want a child in her life. She wanted her own child. She didn't want his child. And so George found and tried to find someone to look after me. And I was the quietest, meekest kind of kid. I didn't do anything out of the ordinary. I was just a quiet child. And so he tried to look for someone to look after me. His family, his sisters, his brothers. He got faced with a lot of no's. And then what he did was he went over the barrier. He told his family that if someone didn't take me, he was going to create a murder-suicide and take my life and his. And someone took me. Now, after his sister took me in, and she raised me, and it was wonderful, I maybe saw him I saw him 5 times in 45 years. I had no connection. I felt I didn't belong. And I wish so badly that I had shared this with my daughter, this story of my life, my childhood, because the epiphany was, it gave me strength. It gave me strength to belong to my community, to the people around me, to my peers in school. As an educator, I saw children wanting a sense of belonging in their school community. They wanted their peers to accept them, to be their friends. But what happens when that doesn't happen? Someone gets ignored, taunted, laughed at. Have you ever seen a child in a schoolyard picking on someone? And when asked, that child might say, "I only wanted so-and-so to be my friend." And truly, that is one of the honest answers. No real meanness, just truthfulness, which is a virtue we tell our children that is so important to share. Because I am a teacher, I am an educator, and I have seen that on the school grounds. These kids wanting so badly to belong that they will do anything to belong, whether it's a poke, a hit, a laugh, a giggle. It's there, it's real. Technology has created a new sense of belonging. It seems to be easier to find a connection online, but that online connection, always the one we want. Is it real? Is it truthful? Is it really belonging if we don't know the person at the other end? Remembering the term, a false sense of belonging, does that phrase apply to the technology of the 21st century? And why is belonging important? We want to feel accepted, to have a voice and not be judged. And we all have a place somewhere in this world. When we belong, is it to what? Or is it to whom? And is it to when? And how? And why is it important that we belong to someone or something? And how does it make us feel when we're rejected or when we're accepted? 2 years ago, to this date, I was on my social media and I got a message in my inbox, and that message told me that I was an alcoholic whore and I should die. I didn't know who that person was, but I can only believe it was trollish behavior. And that trollish behavior, what I did was I shared it on my own personal social media, just so I could teach other people what happens online. It wasn't to make fun of that other person, it was just to share. And 2 weeks later, I got a message. I got a message from that troll who told me I should die, and he said, "I want to apologize." And I said to him, "Share with me your story." And he did. He was 21. He was bullied. He had a father who had substance abuse issues. He had a mother who had mental health issues. He had siblings who weren't very nice to him. And he didn't belong. He didn't feel like he fit in. And so he shared his story, and he wanted to change. And I gave him suggestions on how to change. And so he went with it. He actually creates paintings on stones for Amanda's legacy. And we continue and we talk, and it's been 2 years. And now he has pursued school. He is a volunteer on a crisis line. He said to me, and he wrote me a letter about 4 months ago, thanking me for listening because he feels that he belongs now. I know I'm going over, but I just want to finish. In conclusion, in terms of belonging, we need to ask the questions and how we see it and how we can feel it. And we need to think of the moments where you witness others being vulnerable, where their guard drops and you take the opportunities to ask the questions and share the stories. Opening oneself to others is almost like watching belonging develop in the moment. There is strength in numbers, and we attain more confidence knowing that others are there for you and that you are not alone. The perception of belonging adds to the confidence needed to succeed, and without a sense of belonging, despair can set in, causing rash and impulsive decisions with devastating consequences like my daughter's. Everyone has a different level of belonging. We have close family and friends. We have groups. We have organizations we belong to. We have online connections that are positive. We have our pets. And each person has a different level of comfort with the groups they have and belong to. We must remember about citizenship and community, about being non-judgmental, and also what it means to come together and belong. And what can we do to make this happen? We must listen. We must support. We must be there with a wink, a nod, a gentle touch, a hard poke. All easy to do. And just as a gentle snowflake falls from the sky, which it will in London pretty soon, I guarantee it, delicate, beautiful, unique, and fragile. Those are all similar qualities to what each and every one of us sitting in this room is all about. That snowflake joins many others to make the landscape, although cold, beautiful. We must embrace the beauty of others and create that harmonious landscape for all of us in order to belong. Thank you for listening.
You are all Walrus now, and we know that's not a word. Walrus, it's been fact-checked, not a word. But we use it anyway, so you all belong. You are all Walrus. And I'd like you to join me in thanking all together all of our talkers, Hani Hassan, Kim Samuel, Kamal Al-Sulayli, Heather O'Neill, Jonathan Hood, Molly Burke, Eric Mandoui, and Carol Todd. As I mentioned earlier, this is our 83rd Walrus Talks tonight, which means there are more than 600 Walrus talkers that you can watch or listen to on our website. You can also listen to Walrus articles on our website. They are read aloud. Just go to thewalrus.ca. You can also subscribe at thewalrus.ca. Yes, you can, but it's way easier to go right over there. Kaylin, Catherine, wave at the people. Kaylin and Catherine, right over there, just for you, just for tonight. $25 for an entire year of the Walrus. We practically bring it to your house ourselves. It's true. It's amazing service. You can subscribe over there tonight. It's hard to be Canadian if you don't read the Walrus. That's just true. It's just true. While you're over there, you can sign up for our newsletter. You can also buy Kamal Al-Sulayli's book, Brown, and you can also buy Heather, I think we've got her new book, The Lonely Hearts Hotel. I don't know if we have her backlist, and I'm sure if you buy them, they will nicely sign them for you. Now, I have two more things to do with the audience, so I would like the audience not to move, but I would like our talkers to stand up, please, and Western, and make your way to the back of the room where the reception's going to be. I'm asking them to do this so that you don't do that weird thing and trap them in the front row. Off you go. They will be at the reception. You can talk to them. We know that the reception is the speaker petting zoo. That's what we call it. And I would like you to sit for a moment while we bring up the president of the Arts and Humanities Student Council, Massimo Peruzza, to say a couple of words, and then I have one more thing to tell you, and then we will set you two free as well. Do you understand? Massimo. I'm gonna be right back.
Hi, I'm Massimo Peruzza, and I'm very happy to be here to represent the Western Arts and Humanities, community, and we're very proud to have been a part of this event and to listen to all these great speakers. Thank you all, and I know I'll be talking about what I heard tonight for a while. I hope you all do too, and actually we have an opportunity to speak about it right now. At the reception, I invite you all to join us for food and drink. Thank you to the Walrus. and talk to you in a few minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Massimo. I also want to thank from Western, Dean Michael Milday, Jessica Shigrel, Trista Walker, Joanne Johnston, and everyone at Western Arts and Humanities and the Western alumni for your support. At the reception, you can meet, yes, Kaylin and Catherine from the Walrus, also senior editor Hamutal Dotan. Hamutal, where are you? There's Hamutal. She's wearing a name tag. That means if you have story ideas or, like brown envelopes of anonymous tips, that's why Hamutal's here. She would love to meet you. You can also meet David Leonard, who's the director of events at the Walrus. And as I said, there is food and there is drink. And if you are there, there will be great conversation. Thank you for coming. Remember, please, you are actually the Walrus. Good night, safe home.